Welcome back. I'm talking with Senator Monty Pearce, who has just been 100%, I don't know if you'd say exonerated, or certainly the charges of breach of ethics have been completely dismissed against you. And it was unanimous, both all three Democrats, all three Republicans. Yet I hear that the Democrats are still complaining. Why, I'm not sure. But would you tell us a little bit about the process and what you went through?
All right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, that they accused me of 22 counts of conflict of interest. And many of them were so far outreaching that it was just embarrassing. It made you feel as though they didn't understand the bills they were voting on. Because, like I say, House Bill 379 was the bill that we carried to collect severance tax in the state on oil and gas. Bill 462 was a bill that allowed the Public Utilities Commission to oversee, regulate, and check the safety on the natural gas pipelines. You know, there's no conflict of interest there for me.
And which, by the way, you were not the sponsor of these bills. These bills were brought by industries and stuff. You may have carried them, but you weren't.
They were brought by the state. Those bills were. They finally, after that first day, they narrowed down their accusations down to one bill and 3 votes. And those votes really, because what I had done, and our Senate rule appears rather ambiguous because some people read it saying that you need to declare in committee, but the way I read the bill, it indicates that you need to declare a possible conflict of interest to the presiding officer of the Senate or to the body of the Senate.
And that's what the Attorney General's office said as well.
And that's the floor. If you do it in committee, there's usually only a small group there, and I felt like the more public place, if I was going to declare it, would be on the floor of the Senate, which I did declare it. But they felt like I had violated or hid out a conflict of interest, and so they pursued me on this, and then we went through the hearing. And I guess all the charges were eventually dropped except for that on 464, and there were procedural votes. And I might just explain quickly there what happened. There was some opposition to the bill. It was put together by the industry. The counties met on it. The State Water Resources was involved in it. State lands were involved in it. And they looked out for the interests of the State Oil and Gas Commission. They were there representing them and making sure the state's interests were taken care of. So the bill was brought. I didn't carry it on the floor, but when it arrived to the floor and we started debate on it, a senator got up and moved it to the amending order.
Where many bills end up dying.
where they either plan to gut them or else to kill them, and occasionally they do a good job on them, but there was some desire to get rid of this bill. And so it was a 17-17 tie, and the lieutenant governor broke the tie in favor of putting it to the amending calendar. And so a few days later, I stood up and made the motion to pull off the amending calendar without an amendment. It was not amended yet. And that vote was like an 18-15 vote, if I remember correct, or a 19-15. I don't remember which it was. But we pulled it off, and then the bill was voted on, and I think the eventual vote was like 23 to 11 or something. The opposing, so it passed and went to the governor, was signed, and is in effect. But the people who wanted to amend it were very angry, and they brought all these accusations. And so when they narrowed it down, they said that my procedural votes I also should have declared on. Well, the Attorney General didn't feel like procedural votes were the place to declare.
Right.
Because there's only really one vote on the bill, a final vote. Even a committee vote is only a recommendation to send it to the floor where the entire body will act upon it. Whether they amend it, whether they kill it, or anything else, that's really where the real vote takes place, because the rest are only recommendations, that final vote. And so the procedural votes were only actions within the body. And so the final vote I did declare on, and when the committee, the ethics committee, did finally, after 3 days of hearings, voted, they did clear me. There was a 6-0 vote.
Yeah.
And there were 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans on the committee.
You know, something that we should mention, some of these bills that you carried as being the chairman of Natural Resources, it would make sense that you would carry them. The other thing, again, a layman walking in on the street, if they would have heard what was going on, the Attorney General was very explicit about what a conflict of interest meant. And something that I think I'd like people to know is that a conflict of interest would be if certain benefit inured directly to you and nobody else. You know, that you had something that you personally gained from that. It was clear from day one that you would be considered in a class, if you will, of people, that anybody that would allow a lease to come on your land for speculating that sometime in the future they may find gas there, that oil or gas, that you would have an agreement in place. You were one out of like 500 in Payette County and one of like 1,000 across the state. And when they looked at the different contracts, yours were no different than anybody else. You got maybe even less of some than others got. So it was so clear from day one that I was surprised that it kept going on. And one senator, I believe it was Senator Stinnett, spoke, and she seemed to have so much knowledge and authority on this fracking, and yet I spoke to somebody who's an expert who knows that, told me a totally different story about what it was.
Fracking was not in the bill.
Right.
They actually used that as a ground to bring out their opposition again, because you see there were rules that we dealt with earlier in committee, and those rules took care of fracking and those sort of things. And this 464 bill, it had a number of components to it. It clarified about injection wells, and there's no injection wells, and that's totally different. That's totally regulated by the federal government. We can't use injection wells. If anybody drills a well in Idaho and it's a dry hole, it gets no oil or gas, they only have a certain amount of time to cement that well back up. It can never be used to put materials back in the ground.
Okay.
There's all kinds of things that were taken care of, and they knew it, but they were still angry, and they're still angry about it.
Well, and yet they voted to dismiss charges, and each one of them, I sat there and listened to them supporting the motion to dismiss, saying that, you know, they found that you had done nothing wrong, and yet they kept sharing their displeasure about it, and yet they voted to dismiss because they said there was no conflict.
It's been a hard experience because you spend your life trying to be honest and do everything right, and then to have it impinged like that. Because you know, if they'd have brought it first forth and said, let's talk about these allegations and taken care of them first, you know, and looked into them, and if I was guilty of them, then put me before the ethics committee. But to run them out there with all this huge, massive conflict of interest, and then not one single one of them bore any fruit whatsoever for them.
Yeah.
It was it made it look very lopsided and very mean-spirited. It was a political grandstanding act.
Well, that's too bad. I guess on the good side is that, you know, you were completely found to be innocent, and I know that the legislature in the future will be talking about ethics and how do they handle this in future. And next week I'm going to have someone on the show that will be talking about that.
I hope that the Senate takes a look, even in the few days left, at making some changes in our rules and those sort of things to both clarify them and improve the process.
And it should have nothing to do, by the way, with partisan politics.
No, it should not.
It's
and
either.
We're hopeful that the Democrats will join in with us in that in those rule changes. They did a few years ago, and we tried to make some changes on financial disclosure, so we'd like to see that happen. That's one of the things we'd like to see get done. And then we've obviously trying to figure out how to give some tax relief, put some money away for rainy day, and fund the teachers and backfill the educational funds that were taken away because of the cuts last year, because of the revenue reduction in the economy.
So the final days of this session, what do you think are going to be the big issues?
Well, I think the three I just mentioned are the big issues as far as going home. There are lots of bills that are still out there. There's constitutional amendment. There's you know, there's some bills that need to get done before we go home. The way our process works, the last few days, as you know from having served, there are ways under our Constitution to suspend rules and and get things done more quickly and move them from one house to the other and to the governor. And so that'll be the strategy that'll be developed, is what has to be done, and try to get it done as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
That's a real challenge too, Chuck, because one of the things that bothers me is to get a bill on my desk and it never came through the committee, through my committee, and you know, Ways and Means, that's their job, but you don't have much of a chance to read it, and yet you have to vote on it.
Right, and I think typically, you know, in both houses, they go through a committee process. They're given public hearing, sent to the floor with a due pass. At least the way the Senate works, I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 bills that came on and actually went directly from printing and introduction to second reading calendar.
That's good.
And they were pretty simple bills that everybody was supportive of, and there was no debate, and they passed, you know, quickly. But you're right, those last few days a lot of things happen, and people need to be prepared prior to those to have read bills and be prepared to debate.
I don't anticipate there'll be many bills like you're talking about that are just kind of ramrodded through. We pretty well know the issues.
Right.
We've been talking about them for quite a period of time. There's some negotiating going on between the two bodies and the governor to try to come to a resolution of those. And once those are done and they're set, then they'll be the bills that flow through quickly, because everybody's already aware of what the issues are on them.
So are we taking bets on what day you'll be out?
Well, we're kind of shooting for the Tuesday or Wednesday, and we'll see if we can accomplish that. And it'd be nice to be finished and wrapped up. People have elections, primaries only 6-7 weeks away, so there's a lot to be done in that time period before the primary, and so I think people are anxious to finish up and get home.
Sure.
Yeah. It's spring. It's time to be out. These days are warm. It's
yeah.
The farmers want to get out in the fields, and
It's
you
time.
bet. Okay, well, I want to thank you both for your service, and if people want to get hold of you, they can actually they can get on fyidaho.com.
Right.
We have a Legislative Watch tab, or excuse me, a Legislature tab, and that tells them how they can get hold of you.
Right, and there's a legislative website. They can just go
That's
to
it, yeah,
idaho.gov and find us, and there's a lot of good
Send
information
email.
and links.
Yeah,
there.
that's a connection that
Right.
we have on FY Idaho. All right, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being on the program.
Appreciate
Thank you,
the
Elizabeth.
opportunity.
And thank you.